On June 15th, 28-year-old Antonio Perkins was shot and killed on his front lawn in Chicago by stray bullets as he was Facebook live streaming. We're living in some scary times. Everywhere we turn, it seems as if violence and hatred and oppression in one form or another is leaving us paralyzed, powerless, and afraid. But guess what? In all of those same cities, in Chicago, and in Orlando, and in Charleston, and in Los Angeles, and in New York, and everywhere around the country, there is a movement happening. There are people standing up and fighting for their rights, they're fighting for freedom, and they're fighting for love. Yeah. Yeah. So tonight here at My Peoples, we want to honor not just those who have lost their lives, but those who are right this very moment still fighting for their lives. And we want to do it in the absolute best way that we know how. And that's to talk about how we're going to make a better world. How those of us who are here are going to pull together, stand up for our rights, for those that we've lost, and we're going to make this country better and what it can and should be. So, in the wake of that tragedy, in the aftermath of a very hotly contested primary, and on the final day of the People's Summit, where 3,000 activists gathered together to talk about this very thing, what we're going to do, we're asking ourselves and we're asking you a very simple question. What's next? What kind of future do we want and how are we going to build it? If you're ready for that conversation, then so are we. That's what we're here to do tonight. All right, are y'all ready? Yeah. Okay. So first, to help us kick it off, I want to bring to the stage an activist, writer, and Orlando native, Daniel Leon Davis. Yeah, Daniel.
Good evening, everyone. So, I never wrote this with the intention of, one, having so many eyes on it, and two, reading it out loud. So excuse me if I don't look up that much. I actually wrote this an hour after waking up to over 100 texts from families and friends who just wanted to make sure I was okay and who wanted to tell me everything that had happened. I read this tonight in the honoring the survivors as well as the victims whose lives have been forever changed from losing their loved ones to finding out that they're paralyzed. I grew up just 10 minutes away from Pulse, the gay nightclub in Orlando where a gunman shot and killed more than 49 people last Sunday. Before coming out, I actually drove past it often, but I never really understood the role it would eventually play in my life. Growing up in a Black and brown community where hypermasculinity is often acted out as a form of survival, I actually grew up hating on Pulse. In my community, like in so many others around the world, my identity as a gay man was viewed as a form of weakness. So much so that even when I came out, I refused to go to gay clubs because it meant that I would become one of those gay men. It wasn't until one of my last days in high school that my friends and I all decided to go together. I'm never gonna forget that night. The first time I ever entered Pulse, everything changed. For the first time in my life, I saw people that looked like me living freely. I saw people in their joy. I saw people in their celebration of life. Over the next several years, Pulse became the place where my best friends learned to love themselves. I've seen Pulse go from renovation through renovation through renovation, growing to accommodate the crowds of people who came there every weekend to celebrate. A small bar area with a stage, which was mostly used for drag shows, expanded to another stage in the main room. An all-white room got repainted, but no matter what, Pulse was always packed. While a lot of people turn to churches, LGBTQ communities are often forced to use nightclubs as our safe haven, and Pulse was mine. Although I had built armor to defend myself from the hatred that was spewed to me when I came out, including some from my own mother, the reality was that I still hated myself because of my identity as a gay man. It didn't help that I grew up in a church that had conditioned me to hate myself for loving other men. Pulse was where I learned to love myself as a gay man. Pulse was where I learned to love my community. I met one of my exes at Pulse and even had one of my best friends come out to me at Pulse. Pulse was where I learned the power of femininity. It was where I saw my first drag show and where I learned how to Vogue. Pulse was not just my safe haven, but a safe haven for hundreds of LGBTQ individuals in Orlando. Orlando's LGBTQ community is large and proud. It's also powered by some amazing young people of color who have ensured that their community represents them. Pulse wasn't just about drinks and dancing, it was a place that invested in its community. Although the LGBTQ community in Orlando is large, the reality is that Orlando is still the South. And the hate these individuals have to face every day requires a place like Pulse to exist. Like so many gay nightclubs, Pulse played a major role in the community. This often gets dismissed because it's just a nightclub. In reality, it was a community center. It was where you went to be yourself, to get away from hate, to be free. Today, with a heavy heart and tears streaming down my face, I think of all the people that have been impacted by Pulse every single day. I send my prayers to the families of those impacted by the despicable actions of this hate crime. Together, we will rebuild, but today, we lay here in pain. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you. All right. So are y'all ready to get this conversation started? Yeah. Okay, so I want you to help me welcome our guests tonight. First, we have trans Latina activist, a national leader in the LGBT immigrant rights movement, and the director of programs at Transgender Law Center, Isa Noyola. Also, help me welcome writer and activist and co-host of the podcast Good Muslim, Bad Muslim, Taz Ahmed. This next guy has been called the most important investigative reporter of all time. He's also been called twisted and maniacal. Please help me welcome to the stage Greg Palast. You may know him from ABC's How to Get Away with Murder. He is an actor, but also an amazing activist. Please welcome Kendrick Sampson. And last, but certainly not least, a friend to the show, actress and Rosario. Actress and Rosario. Y'all, it's the last show, okay? Actress and activist Rosario Dawson. Thank you, Rosario.
Thank you, Eric.
All right, so I know you all were able to just hear Daniel's words, which were absolutely beautiful. And one of the reasons I appreciate it so much is that in the national conversation around what happened in Orlando, I feel like there's only been a certain type of voice heard, right? It's been a lot of people talking about the Latino community. It's been a lot of people talking about the LGBTQ community. And I guess I'll start with you, Isa, as someone who kind of lives at the intersection of both of those communities. What was your kind of first thought when you heard about what happened in Orlando at Pulse?
Oh, so many thoughts around the state that my community is already surviving and the ways in which we have survived genocide, how we continue to survive violence on a daily basis. I thought about my own chosen family that was born out of the gay clubs, and how this Latino night was the night that we all looked forward to. And so to then realize that a community was violently attacked on this night, when already these spaces are so few and far between, when they're they're being violently, also these spaces are being violently taken away from us, as we've seen in San Francisco, here in Los Angeles, and many cities and states across the country. These spaces where we are centered, where we're reflected, are at risk of disappearing. Yeah. And so I just think that there's so much devastation that my community is already navigating to begin with. If I think about all the ways that my community is surviving in you know, in detention centers, in prisons, through the immigration system, through state violence, how we're targeted and profiled. And then to add other layers of violence, of interpersonal violence, of domestic violence, of, you know, just the everyday, it is incredibly a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, yeah. And the phrase you used a couple times, I heard it in Daniel's piece, and I've been thinking about it a lot, is this idea of safe space, right? Like, I know growing up in the African-American church, when I heard about Charleston last year, that was my first thought, was like, whoa, this is a sacred space that no longer feels safe. And yet I don't hear that being talked about much in the media. Like, all I've heard about this is mainly like gun control, right? Which is important and necessary, but
well,
I mean.
And the, you know, the irony of all it is, like, we are now, like, the community is calling for police to like uphold these like safe spaces, when for our community, like, to add more police to these nights are like the opposite of like what it means to be safe, right? Like, to have more cops show up on Latino night or whatever POC night is actually not the ways that my community feels safe, right?
Yeah.
Because we also know that like ICE has collaborations with the police, that through this collaboration, through so many other racial profiling, you know, kind of pieces, that our communities are threatened.
Yeah. And I mean, and I was wrong when I said the only narrative we hear in the media is guns, because the other one we hear and heard immediately was terrorism, right? Radical Islam, which we now know, or are hearing, that this probably was not connected to extremist Islam, although it's not confirmed. But that's the most recent news, is that that probably is not the case. So Taz, as someone who focuses a lot and talks a lot in your work about the way that Islam is marginalized and represented in the media, what was your thought as you were hearing all this play out?
My thought, always, whenever I hear something, is it going to be a Muslim person? Always. And then the way you can always tell is, like, when media says if it's a terrorist, you're like, it's probably someone brown. If they say it's a lone wolf, then you're like, oh, it's probably someone white, because of how media's portraying it, right? So I think that's one of the things that you're always, like, as a brown Muslim person in this country, you're always on the sitting on the edge of your seat, just saying, like, please let it not be. Yeah. And of course it was. But then all this other stuff's also coming out. I think the latest news is that FBI was trying to entrap him, was something that came out today. So it's just, it's just the things that are, the different layers piling onto this are just insane.
Yeah, how have you all felt, and any of you can jump in, how have you all felt in kind of hearing this narrative play out? Especially, I know that most of you were actively and are actively involved in electoral politics, and we'll get there in a little bit, but just this was like a jarring, right, kind of moment, not just for America and for the country, but also for people who are actively involved in politics. Like, where are you all, what are you all feeling right now?
One of the things that I liked seeing in social media, which I did not see at all in you know, mass media, corporate media, was people really checking and looking into how all of our safe spaces have been violated, you know, because you're talking about a church, you're talking about a nightclub, you're talking about a movie theater, you're talking about a school, you're talking about like all of these, you're talking about a marathon, like you're talking just all these different spaces, and people then comparing and looking over history. You can't say this is the biggest mass shooting ever, because we've had that when you had, you know, the KKK going and burning down houses en masse and shooting down people by the hundreds. And so we've just had this really violent history that people are starting to look into and really investigate, and not just be told the narrative of how they're supposed to just isolate this one moment and have a perspective on it, but really looking at it largely and identifying communities that you didn't necessarily identify with before, and having a connection. And feeling like this is something that's bigger than just the Latino community. This is something that's bigger than the LGBTQ community. This is something that's bigger than the Muslim community. This is our safe spaces. This is home. This is the world, the planet that we're living in. And what are we all doing to protect each other and to look out for each other and to be on top of it? So like the filibuster, the 15-hour filibuster that came out of it, like seeing people standing up and going, no, we need to look at this. That vote is tomorrow, that he stood for. But it's like, to just even have that idea of like, if someone's on an FBI list, let them have a gun. You know, like, just like, there's just really basic stuff. Do background checks. Like, let's stop. What is stopping us from being able to do that? It's more difficult to get an abortion than it is to get a gun. Right. And that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Right. And people are starting to wake up to that outside of their outside of the targeted communities of the moment, but really starting to look at the larger picture. And that's the thing that really moves me, because that's where critical change does happen, where people across the intersections start to collaborate together to make real change.
Yeah, yeah. Greg, what are you hearing?
Well, I'm always interested in how the media, the American media, handles it, because I'm coming here from exile. I usually report for BBC and The Guardian, so I'm here as a kind of an internal exile, as a foreigner watching American TV. And the first thing is there was a lot of confusion because they didn't decide who to hate first, right? You know, and it's like, who do we hate first? So Donald Trump starts out in the morning by tweeting out that, thank you for the congratulations on me being right. You know, those Muslims pouring across the border from Mexico or whatever, right? And you know, it's a local guy, okay? And you know, and they say this is the biggest mass killing. Excuse me, Tim McVeigh, a white guy, a Gulf War veteran, okay, killed over 200 people with fertilizer bomb, okay? All right, and including crushing a children's center. All right, and so how do we? Where are we going to put the wall next? Where do they want to put the wall next? Actually, you know what the cheapest thing would be is just build a wall around Donald Trump and make him pay for it.
Yeah. And Kendrick, did you have anything to add, kind of about how you've been dealing with this? And I mean, again, the conversation has shifted political, but also, I mean, I know I've been seeing my friends on Facebook, and myself included, just kind of trying to figure out, how do I as a human process this, all of this pain and all of this grief and people that we love, and how do you be there for someone else? So where are you finding yourself in that conversation?
Well, I support Greg's wall. And I just find myself really frustrated. You know, I do my best not to argue with people at all. You know, especially when we're on the road, talking to people about voting, and, you know, I'm not trying to convince anybody about my position. I'm just telling them what I'm passionate about. But then that turns into defense when you have an incident like this, where it seems like all of my social media conversations are defending Islamic people, are defending, like, you know, people are saying, well, people are going to wake up now that this, you know, community, the LGBT community had this tragedy. And I'm like, well, if they didn't wake up with Sandy Hook, with children, I have very little faith that they're going to wake up with gay Latinos, with the LGBTQ Latino community in the South. And so I'm like,
let's go ahead and add that.
You know, so
salient point.
You know, but at the same time, I got inspired. I mean, I don't necessarily think that was the catalyst that they're like, oh, this LGBTQ Latino community, we have to stand up for them. It was more so that the point that this country is in right now. There's this, you know, we did this speech series yesterday. And there's this brilliant speech.
Oh, The People Speak.
The People Speak at the People Summit. And it was talking about, you know, this feeling of turmoil and fear, I mean, and anger and all this bubbling beneath the surface. And people are ready to make a change. People are ready to get involved, and activists are being championed by people like Bernie Sanders and are ready to act and be activists in Congress. And, you know, like you said, the filibuster, and people saying, let's not have a moment of silence this time. Let's have a moment of activism. Let's have a moment of, you know, we're tired of actually staying silent.
Yeah, yeah.
But also then looking at the realities of, as you were talking about, which is that this is a community that's already been incredibly hard hit and has been for a really long time, you know, and just really getting the media literacy of looking at, okay, so a gorilla was killed because a little kid fell into it, but because they were a black family, I guess that was okay to then trash the father who wasn't even there for being a bad parent. But like a white kid goes and gets eaten by an alligator or whatever like that, and it's the park's fault, and you're like, you know, and people are actually, I see it. I've seen it my whole life. We've been in this conversation for a long time, but I'm seeing that happen in real time, where people go, wait. why are these narratives so different?
Yeah.
And, you know, not necessarily knowing what to do with the next part after that, but there is this very pervasive consciousness that's going on right now, and you can't unknow something once you know it. And people are seeing it. They're seeing it in real time. And these hashtags, because that was our March speech that you were talking about in 2013, there's this bubbling that's going on, the sleeping giant. And when you look at the people speak, and your speeches about Wall Street and speeches about this stuff, that's 100 years old, 125 years old, these speeches that Howard Zinn put together of all of these different years. But like, we are at this point where it's fomented into something really critical, and people want to take that and do something about it, not just talk. We've seen every organization spend millions upon millions of dollars doing awareness campaigns. We are aware. Thank you so much for making us so aware. Can we now be active? What are we going to do to put that behind us so we can move on to the other issues rather than piling them up?
Can we learn, what can we learn from history? Like, and I'm looking at you, Greg, anybody can answer though, but I know as a reporter, like, what other time in history has been like this, where you feel like there's this perfect storm of events and kind of awareness, we've maxed out on awareness, we all know, and there's this moment where everyone wants to do something. Is there anything that we can learn from other moments in history that are similar?
Well, I mean, I go back, because I'm, you know, from another century, so I go back to the, civil, you know, I lived through Nixon. Everyone's worried, you know. And so we had the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement, and that they came together. And it took Martin Luther King to say that this is one single struggle. See, there was an anti-war movement, there's a civil rights struggle, and then you needed King to say, guys, it's one struggle. It's one set of blood being spilled. And it's being spilled whether it's in Selma, Alabama, or Orlando, or Da Nang. It's one fight, and maybe out of this horrible set of killings, that maybe we look at as one fight, because we've been kind of like scattered. And the only time we seem to get together is like when there's a campaign for a candidate, then we can all march under one umbrella. So they say, okay, Bernie Sanders this week, and what are we going to do next month? So can we maintain the idea, as we did in that short period? It was both the most horrible time in America and the best, because it was the one time where literally, physically, emotionally, and politically, everyone was marching together. And can that come back?
You say you don't have a good poker face. So.
Well, I'm sorry. I
you're not supposed to. I like that.
Yeah.
Tell us what you're thinking.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm all about like one love, and we are a community, and I think we need to stand up together. And I've also seen that language and that sort of idea kind of then, like my community in particular, like kind of just get screwed over essentially, because there is a specificity around what happened. There is a specificity around the harm that's happened, the historical harm, right? And the fact that my community is like, the very little that we have, even that is being taken away from, right? And so, what does it mean to like all of a sudden have this platform for like, for media visibility, right? For all the resources that are being directed to Orlando and to the community, and then for all of us to talk about it as like this was an attack on all of us. And, you know, there are very specific families that will probably have a hard time navigating those resources because they're immigrant, because they're undocumented, because they have, you know, because of criminalization or whatever, right? Because they're also not used to receiving services, because they're used to being neglected, because they're used to, and they can't navigate systems that require them to speak in English, right? And so I think that I've just seen this rhetoric kind of just in the funding world, in resource, like, if I think about queer and trans organizations that exist nationally, like they don't. Like they're very, like they have one staff, you know, to like address ending trans detention for a country, right? For like, to fight against ICE, right? We think about the community, how it's the organizing piece for queer and trans people of color and the leadership has been neglected and has not been resourced. So to me, like that needs to be centered. Those leaders need to be at the forefront. They need to really help figure out the what does it mean to like, you know, to like really think about the support that is needed on the ground to connect with the families. You know, just having done organizing for many years and being in crisis mode, responding to violent attacks and death. These moments are so critical for our communities to feel like when I've had a trans woman murdered and I've had to go to that family and our organization has had to come to that family to respond. So oftentimes, like, they don't even know how their child has identified. They don't even know, like, all these other pieces. And so for me to connect to them is an important moment. And it's complicated, right? And that I think our Latinx leadership really is needed in this moment to really think about how do we support a community that has been devastated.
And that's actually what thank you. Also, first of all, yeah. And that is what I was gonna ask you though, like whether, I don't know if you like the term allies and people call themselves allies, but how do folks who are not a part of that community actually support? Yeah. Because I think that's what I see certainly on my Facebook feed, people who are well-meaning, right?
Of course.
But potentially using the wrong narrative or not knowing where to send help or what to do and kind of maybe even doing more harm than good. I hate to say that, but so what should people do?
Again, I think it's about really understanding who has been doing this work, who has been doing violence prevention work, who is really connected to the community. And I would say that there's a lot of folks that are not legible in many parts of the country that are not part of a nonprofit. They're not part of, like, they're doing case management out of their cars. I think about Ariana Lint in Florida. She's a trans Latina woman who has been really offering HIV prevention services for trans communities, for queer communities, and she's not a part of any nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
And so there's so many types of leaders that I think that to really understand those people when they speak, when they're interrupting a rally, saying, no, we need to speak. We need to actually, not just elected officials, not just the police in this moment, we actually need to speak because our community is hurting. People need to really listen and step back, right? And say, no, actually, these are the folks that we want to support.
Yeah.
Because we're not seeing that right now. We're seeing Gay Inc., we're seeing mainstream LGBT orgs parachute into Orlando right now, and that with the savior mentality, the savior complex, right? And it's primarily white cis gay males. You know, and that's going to have like negative consequences for our Latinos communities that maybe just don't relate to them, right?
Right. Kendrick, you want to jump in?
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of address both. We were in I attended a panel that Sean King was on where he talked about, I believe it was him, everything is kind of jumbled right now, but anyway, he was talking about how everything, you know, all of these movements were not popular. You know, the women's voting movement, the suffragette movement, the Martin Luther King's didn't think that this was going to be called the civil rights movement. It wasn't like he coined the term. It wasn't a hashtag or anything back then. So all of these movements were not necessarily popular back then, and it was not, you know, the entire nation or even the entire black community engaged in marching. He said if I could get 5% of the population of blacks to get out into the streets, I could make a huge change. You know, just 5%, and I don't even think he got that. You know, he got thousands and thousands of people to support. And you did have allies, and people got it wrong, and you know, and that's okay. When we were out there, we went to Stanford, and these two pretty white, tall, blonde girls came up and, you know, started talking about how they could get involved in Black Lives Matter. And they were already doing work in San Quentin, I believe. And I was like, well, and she said, well, we got made fun of. And I'm like, well, that's what's going to happen. I'm like, you know, I get involved in the Islamic community and I say the wrong thing and then I get corrected and then I correct myself whenever I make that mistake again. Or if I do my best not to make that mistake again and then correct other people when they make that mistake, and that spreads. And I don't think anybody should wait until they have all the information to get involved. They will say wrong things. So I think it's really important. Like, it's not popular right now necessarily, even though there is a groundswell. It's still, you know, you still encounter things like, you know, well, the Christians haven't ever done things like this, and you're like, well, you know, you're actually living on the foundation of some very terrible acts done in the name of Christianity, like Manifest Destiny, aka genocide. So there's like, there's certain things, you know, that you say, and then people are like, oh, well, okay. you know, and then they get corrected and then they move on. I don't think anybody needs to, I think we do need to know if you could name some of the prominent or people that you respect that are people of color in the LGBTQ community that are doing the work correctly, that can disseminate the information or whatever, that would help. But also, don't wait until you have those people available to you to get involved. We need the allies. That's what I've learned most importantly campaigning with Bernie, is that he's pulled all of our perspectives up and above our differences, because there are several factions to every single activist group, feminism, you know, Black Lives Matter, that don't like each other's logos or color choices or whatever. And then under this, he says, look, there's an overarching theme, which is why people wait until the election. Okay, we can actually affect policy now. Yeah. And immediately, what's great about this one is that, you know, a bunch of, and I hate to go on long, but I'm long-winded. So there's, so, you know, each president, whenever presidential candidate, when they lose or when they seemingly have lost, they disappear immediately. They go to their vacation or whatever and pout or whatever they do, or get pissed off, which they should be. And if they were, you know, had to deal with voter suppression and things like that, like we are right now. But what's great about this historic moment, what we don't realize is, even though it's not popular, we are living in a historic time, and he has not disappeared. Bernie has not disappeared. As soon as people discounted him, he said, okay, automatically went on the air and said, this revolution is continuing. And then 4,000 people organized in Chicago, and then we go to this People Summit, and there are people organizing all over. We had a long talk all night at the People Summit where, you know, everybody was shooting out different ideas, and people started thinking, this is gonna not cancel out this one. And then we were all like, wait a minute, we can do all of this.
Yeah, yeah. And I want us to do all of this after the next break, okay?
Yeah.
No, because that was a fantastic segue to what we're going to talk about, but we've got an amazing comedian who's actually ready and chomping at the bit to come out and perform for us. So y'all excited about that? Yeah. Okay. So please welcome to the stage, Sam J.
Yay.
Yay!
I didn't know my mic was on. Hey guys, man. This conversation is so fucking real and deep and shit, and I don't have a lot of valuable stuff to add to it. I just got a lot of dick jokes and weird stuff to talk about. Fuck it, right? Whatever. We did it. That was real. I've been doing a lot of traveling, doing comedy, traveling, which I love to do because I'm always exposed to something. And that's what I love about traveling. It's like you learn something about yourself, you learn something about what you don't like too. That's the great thing about traveling. Unless you're exposed to people, you don't know what you hate about them, you know what I mean? So you gotta be exposed to things to know, like, I don't fuck with that, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was in Asheville, North Carolina, which is way in the mountains in North Carolina, and I realized I don't like people without teeth. I don't like it. I don't like people without teeth giving me advice, you know? I just feel like teeth are the first steps to advice. They're the initial thing for me to trust what you're saying, and if you don't have them, be gone, dude. I don't really care. Figuring out race stuff through traveling, man. I just went to Bonnaroo, so I was gone for 2 weeks. And I just moved to LA from Boston, so LA was a culture shock for me because I had never seen so many homeless white dudes in my life. I was like, what is this? Just good white man potential being wasted on the streets. What are you doing? And I really hate when they ask me for money. Like, bruh, I'm a black lesbian. I'm never gonna give you shit. I have too many adversities. I'm not gonna give you money. You could walk, go cut your hair and go to a Subway, get a job. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. But then I went to Bonnaroo and they were even more free, man. It was even more broke down. It's just like people sleeping on the ground with no blankets, eating medium rare burgers. Like, this is awesome. I had a medium rare burger for the first time. Didn't kill me. My mother lied, you know? Everything my mother told me was a lie. And that's how I ended up doing mushrooms, because I was like, hey, if this burger shit is a lie, maybe these mushrooms aren't that bad, you know? So I ended up in this trailer doing mushrooms with these dudes, and they put it in a chocolate bar because white people know how to do drugs right. So he gives me this giant chocolate bar of mushrooms, and I eat it, and I'm like, word, I'm gonna go see Pearl Jam. I go to this Pearl Jam concert, and halfway through the concert, I tweak out off the mushrooms. I tweak out, and I got to get the fuck out of there. I'm rushing out of this Pearl Jam concert. I run to a corner. I dump 6 bottles of water on my head to bring myself back down. And then I'm like, what am I going to do now? And I go watch a bluegrass band because, like, fuck it, right? And I walk into this bluegrass experience, and that's when I realized why they're like hippies was a movement and why they were like, oh, drugs bring people together. Because I'm pretty sure the whole time they were talking about lynching. I know they were. But I couldn't stop watching because the mushrooms had like put the filter down and I was just like, this is good music. I don't know if I agree with the message, but I like the vibes, you know? So I'm hanging out and the bluegrass band's over and I'm like, what do I do now? And there was this little like EDM party a little bit away from me. And I was like, all right, fuck it, I'll walk over here. So I walk over to this EDM party and it's popping and I'm watching it and the DJ's going crazy. And then this jack black dude, like he was super strong, man. Diesel, no shirt on. But he had on these giant fairy wings. And he's walking through the crowd and he's pushing people like, man, you better not crumple my fairy wings so I'll fuck you up. And I was like, wow. What's going to happen? And then he stopped in this clearing, and a white dude who was equally as jacked in a Teletubby costume walked up to him. And I was like, what's about to go down? This is about to be a showdown, right? And then they hugged. And as I saw it, I was like, I don't know if this is how Martin Luther King dreamed it. But I think this is it. I think that's where we're at as a society, man. It's where we're going. I'm not mad. I like it. I'm kind of there as a person, man. I'm just like, man, we gotta like just let stuff go. We gotta start embracing stereotypes. I know that's a big thing to say, right? Because everyone's like, stereotypes are wrong. You can't judge people by a group. But I'm like, nah, man, just embrace your thing. Use it to your advantage and to help people. Because stereotypes aren't going away. But what you can do with stereotypes is dope. Like people think black people are hostile. I use that all the time. I am not a hostile person by any means. I'm a hugger and I'm a lover. But what? I ride the train and the bus, I play that shit up. I blast music out my headphones. I look left and right real crazy. I bark every once in a while. No white people sit next to me for miles on the train or the bus. It is beautiful because I don't got to deal with your boogie boards and sailboats and shit you bring on public transportation. Like you don't know people got places to be, man. Like, you're not aware people are trying to go to work. Like, is that a saxophone? What the fuck is this dude doing? I'm just trying to clock in, bro. I'm just trying to clock in. Gotta embrace your thing, man. Like, we think Asians are super, like, magical and karate tough. If you're not karate tough and you Asian, play it up, man. White women have the power of tears. You guys cry and get whatever the fuck you want. That's beautiful. Keep crying, white ladies. Don't stop crying, man. That's dope. I wish someone cared when I cried. No one cares, you know? That's the truth. No one cares, yo. I cry, people care, they don't care. And it's messed up, it's conditioning. I don't even care when I see black people cry. And that's fucked up. If I see a black lady cry, I'm just like, man, times are tough. Toughen up. It's time to go live life. I see a white lady cry, I'm like, oh my God, how do we help her? Because y'all just know how to break down, man. White women tears are powerful. White women tears are so powerful that a white woman could drown her own baby, and if she cries enough, she's not going to jail. Facts. I'm not saying postpartum's not real. I'm just saying we wouldn't know about it if white women weren't crying about it. This is how real white women tears are. I just got a BMW. And the other day I was in my car, listening to Future, having a good time, no AC on, parked. 110-degree weather, the windows automatically went down. You remember that white lady that accidentally killed her kid from leaving the windows up and he overheated? They made a technology to excuse that behavior. That is the power of white women tears. We will make new technology to stop them from crying. But you can't help people with that. Like, I was at a comedy festival recently. I was hanging out with my homeboy. We automatically looked suspicious because he is a man. I look like a man. We were both black, and we smelled like a shit ton of weed. We were smoking mad weed. So I'm trying to hide the weed. I'm ducking and dodging security. And then this white lady walks up, and she's like, hey, I smell that weed you're smoking. I would love to smoke with you. I'll even light a cigarette to help mask the smell if you let me. And I felt like we had just picked up an item in Zelda. Like, you just acquired white woman shield. You are now invisible to cops, security, and otherwise nosy ass crackers. Hey, y'all were fun. Bye.
So for this week's special report, we have our resident journalist and film guru, Chris Laughter, and a bunch of our team who went out. The last time we were all here together was the day before the California primary. So a lot has happened since then, and our special report picks up where we left off.
Matter. They say as California goes, so goes the country. So why are we the last state to vote? Does California even matter?
California has the largest economy in the U.S. and the 8th largest economy in the world.
California has a population of 39 million people. That's equivalent to 21 of the smallest states and the District of Columbia.
California has more whites, Latinos, Asians, and American Indians than any other state.
California consists of 475 delegates, the largest of all 50 states.
Do you feel like your vote here today actually matters, and why? I do feel like my vote matters. They're still going to tally the votes, and California is still going to go one way or the other, and it's my right to vote.
It looked like it was going to make a difference for a while, and then the AP said that Hillary had won, and that kind of took the wind out of everything.
I mean, even though they called it kind of technically last night, I still feel like it matters because it pushes a progressive agenda.
A show of support will at least send a message.
Okay, hold the phone. The people's vote is just a tool for the party to gauge which candidate is stronger before they make their decision. But with so much controversy and unsureness in the outcome, is the tally an actual representation of what the country wants? Is it fair and balanced, or unfair and unbalanced? 8 for him, 8 for her, she wins. Got it? Great. And what role does mainstream media play in all of this?
I think that they've basically turned it into a reality television show.
It really does have an effect on you and your opinions and your way you think.
I mean, it's essentially like junk food, you know? So
it feels like we're for this person, and so they just push that, and it doesn't feel right.
I don't watch a lot of network news anymore, and I only watch one program on Fox because the rest of them I just can't I can't fathom that they're saying this to the American people.
If somebody says something awful and terrible, let's cover that a bunch, as opposed to listening to people that have things to say about policy or what's actually happening.
That's fucking crazy. So a lot of people don't like the way the media is handling the election. But how about the election process itself?
Well, I think there's a lot of divisiveness that I have in I'm 68, going to be 69 by the time the election rolls around. And I've never seen anything like what we're going through right now.
There's so many different ways of voting from state to state, and how each state does it differently. And I always thought, well, if I'm registered to vote, I just go vote, and every vote will count. And I didn't know about the super delegates. I didn't know, there's a lot of things that I wasn't aware of.
Super PACs. I don't like them.
Obviously, the people with the most money have a better chance than others to get the vote that they want for themselves.
You don't say. When it comes to elections, a lot of people are confused about how it actually works, and they're fed up with being confused, and they feel like it might be rigged. But what do we have to be hopeful for in the general election?
You know, there are young people that, in great numbers, have participated in the 60s, and there's been a resurgence of that now. Of young people being involved in politics.
And there's clearly some problems, so I'm hopeful that we can identify those problems and fix them instead of just patching them and moving forward, just have them show up again in bigger, worse ways.
I'm hoping that the divisiveness leaves. Now, I don't know how that's going to happen with either Donald Trump or Hillary Rodham Clinton in the White House, but somehow we've got to get ourselves together and become a nation again.
It feels like the American people are ready to change something. And I'm really hopeful that on a community level and grassroots level that Bernie has kind of built up, that there is more activity on just in general, people getting up and trying to change the system for everyone.
The secret to getting things done is to act. One more time. Is to act. Together. My people. What happens next After all is said and done and all the votes are cast, will our elected representatives be who we decided as a nation? And will they represent us or something else?
So, Greg, investigative reporter.
Okay, I got the bad news right here.
Okay, what's the bad news?
If you could read this. This I got from the Secretary of State. That's the person in charge of the voting. Now, you heard that the AP has said that Hillary Clinton won. Now, what's interesting about this piece of paper is that this is the official non-count. 1 week after the election, 2 million votes were cast and still not counted in California. A week after the election. How do you have the winner when 2 million votes aren't counted? They've told us who won before they counted the votes. And it's like, and it's not just anyone's vote. If it were just random, you'd say, oh, well, we can ignore 2 million votes. I mean, I don't know, you know, maybe in Iran they can ignore 2 million votes. But, you know, the problem is that we know whose votes they are, too. Okay, I've been studying this for like nearly 2 decades. So I looked into the pile of votes that aren't counted. Most of those are people who are independent voters, okay? Independent voters were voting with almost 3-to-1 for Sanders over Clinton. Now, I'm not for any candidate or against any. I'm just the guy that investigates. I'm just a reporter. Work with Rolling Stone now, whatever. You know, I'm not here for a candidate, but I am here to tell you that approximately, as a statistician too, I used to teach statistics when I had a life, and about, you can estimate from the breakdown of who voted demographically, that you had about 750,000 votes in there for Hillary Clinton. If we get all those votes counted, that's what you'll find. You'll have about 1.25 million votes for Bernie Sanders. Now that's about 500,000 vote plurality sitting there, uncounted, untouched yet. A lot of it's going to be thrown away.
Because?
Well, wait, but let me tell you, if you do the arithmetic, if those of you who survived, you know, the No Child's Behind Left program in LA schools like I did, then you would know that there was that 500,000 plurality in the uncounted vote for Sanders would put him about 100,000 ahead of Clinton if you counted all the votes. And this is not about whether I love Sanders, hate Sanders, whether it was stolen or not stolen. These are votes uncounted. And the nasty secret of America is that we don't count all the votes. And this is the official non-count. This is not, it's not like a secret conspiracy. I could just call up the Secretary of State and you could download the numbers that aren't counted county by county. It's sick. Okay, so we have something in California, what really was the big deal in California, almost 1 million votes, and this is nationwide. So if you're listening from, and you're not in California, don't just think, oh, it's just all those earthquake-addled people that screwed it up. This involves everyone in America. We have something called a provisional ballot. What is a provisional ballot? I used to ask people in crowds, I'd say, who's ever had a provisional ballot? I was in a crowd of 400 last year, and 2 people raised their hand that they got something called a provisional ballot. It's the only 2 black men in the entire crowd. They got something called a provisional ballot. Think of it as a placebo ballot. You get to think you voted. You saw that guy with that little tag. It said, I voted in that in the film. Mm-hmm. Everyone had those little tags, I voted. They think they voted. They think they voted. They made out a ballot, but if they got a provisional ballot, and over 1 million people did in California, and we're going to get 10, 15 million of them in November, depends where you are. Those ballots may get counted, they may not. If they get challenges, no way. In a tight election, they throw them out. And that's what people don't understand. We have vote by mail in California. People mail in their ballot. Good luck, they go postal. You know, how many of those ballots are going to get counted? I can tell you, as of today, it's 3 weeks after the election, we still have 1 million votes in California uncounted, but we have a winner. We have a winner. We may count the votes one day, but we already have the winner. Mm-hmm. And that's what I worry about in November. What's going to happen is, what's interesting to me is that, as I was saying, as going through this stuff, is that for the first time, you have all these young, white, activated voters voting, and for the first time in the Sanders vote in California, white people were voting, being treated as voters as if they turned black. And they were given these provisional ballots. And, you know, this is the type of thing I see in the African American communities in these precincts where you get this tremendous non-count of the vote. This is an American disease. And so what's happened is, and it's very fancy, we don't have Jim Crow voting anymore. It's Dr. James Crow, systems analyst. It's kind of changed, become much more sophisticated. But here it is. It's not something I make up, guys. Go to the Secretary of State's website in any state and find out how many votes don't get counted and what are the color of those votes. And whose votes are they? We know.
Right, right. So,
can I say something nice?
Go, please.
Ask me a question about something happy.
Well, that's not happy, Greg. I don't know what's happy about that.
I want to cheer up.
It's happy when you're the person who exposed the election being stolen in 2000.
Yeah.
You know, like it's after the fact, but it's information, and it came so long after the fact, and it was published in proper news in the BBC and the Guardian and here in Rolling Stone.
Well, that's I guess
right? So
people
like
don't know what
countries.
Rosario is talking about. Back in 2000. George Bush officially won the presidency of the United States by 537 votes out of over 100 million cast. But that was in Florida. What they didn't tell you in the U.S. news was that I did an investigation. 58,000 black men, mostly black men, were accused of being criminals not allowed to vote. Every single one was innocent. Everyone was innocent. Their only crime was voting while black. But so who would those 58,000 black men have voted for? George W.? So we know what happened in 2000, but it didn't just stop happening. And my problem is, as I've said before, like Rosario brought out, I reported it was the top of the nightly news in Britain, on BBC. It was the front page of the papers like The Guardian, and all over the world, everywhere but my own country, where it just, the truth bounced off the electronic Berlin Wall. And that's why I'm so happy to be here. This is talk about asylum. This is kind of like news asylum. You know, I can sneak it in. You know?
That's what we created, not people's votes.
Yes.
Anyways.
So I actually want to ask a question, because Kaz, you work with an organization called 18 Million Rising, right? Which is, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, it's an Asian American organization. We do digital media stuff. So we're kind of like move on for the Asian American community.
So the conversation around voting right now has been very black and white, and it typically is in national media, right? When you hear people talking about voter suppression, it's usually African Americans. When you hear people talking about folks who are not suppressed, it's usually white people. Where do you find yourself in those conversations? And when you're working with 18 Million Rising, or when you're working with the Asian American community, what is the narrative that you're sharing about voting in the election and their voice?
Well, one of the biggest issues with our community is that we're largely immigrant communities. We're limited to English speaking. We speak multiple languages. And I think what we hear from the mainstream campaign is that it's too difficult to get out the Asian American vote, which is what you hear, Asian American and Pacific Islander vote. The campaign that I worked on last fall, we turned out people in 17 different Asian American and Pacific Islander languages. And I think that's unheard of. If you go to any mainstream political candidate and say you need to organize in 17 different languages, they'll just say that's like not cost effective. But it's possible, and it's so important for communities of color to go to the polls, not just to get elected in office, but to get our issues heard and to push for public policy, which affects the people of color community, but in my case, the Asian American community.
Right. And so when you're talking about the responsibility to create those materials, you're talking to the campaign specifically, right? Because like for the Voting Rights Act, I think it's Section 203, like requires who to provide those materials.
Yeah, I mean, in California, I think the languages that need to be provided are maybe 13, not 17.
Got it.
But that being said, there are so many different, our community is so diverse. There's so many different languages. There's so many different cultural nuances. And then it doesn't just come down to languages. There's the Asian American community will read, like the Vietnamese community will read a Vietnamese newspaper. The South Asian community will probably read India West. Like there's different like media outlets. So they're not tuning into CNN. They're not tuning into Fox News. They're turning into media that's focusing on them. And so we need to figure out how to tap into that and talk to the voters that are on the ground. And because of this, actually, the Asian American community is largely nonpartisan. About 33% of the community is nonpartisan because none of these mainstream campaigns talk to them. So why should they vote for any, like, lean in any direction of any party when no one's talking to them? So when they go to the polls, they're the independent voters that are being marginalized.
Yeah, in fact, actually, it's almost too bad. The bad news to give you is that in my latest investigations of vote suppression, we'll do the happy stuff after. the Asian American community is the #1 target now, because even though they don't identify and register to a party, in the last election they voted as if they turned black again. 74% voted for Obama, and that made them a big target. So I've been looking at a new method of knocking out voters called cross-check, where they say someone's voted twice, and what they use, and you'll love this, they'll use first name, last name matches. So you have, in the Korean community, the number of people named Park and Kim who've supposedly voted twice. It hits the black community. The Jackson 5 is there, and the Jackson 5,000 are there. You know how many Michael Jacksons they say have voted. Literally, this is a crazy system. And I had a whole list. I was in Ohio where they were knocking off people named Muhammad because they said it's all the same guy voting many, many times. But it's because it's the most common name on the planet. Yeah. But you actually have thousands of people named Mohammed. They have different middle names. They say, well, that doesn't matter, because it's, those people, they very sneaky. They'll just change their middle name and vote again. But there's a new attack on the Asian American community, and the Asian American community is not yet aware that they're under this new attack that's going to hit big in November. So we should talk, because it's gonna be an ugly scene.
It's a pre-crime kind of thing. It's going, these two people might be the same person and they might be voting twice. So rather than that potentiality, which is very nil, I mean, it's just a voter fraud thing that spread voter ID laws. It's all based on there's not much, there's nothing to really back it up. But they did it anyway because it's a huge suppressive effort. So you end up having all the Wongs, all the Gonzaleses, all the Mohammeds, all of the Jeffersons, all of those folks would be, those two people will be disenfranchised.
That's right.
In different states across the nation. You're talking about millions of people.
That's right.
And we should still be voting. We still need to go out there. Like that's the hard part, because when you get that information out there, there's so many people who don't show up and don't vote as it is, you end up discouraging them that much more.
Let me throw, this is one thing I have to add in, because in the past few weeks I've been doing investigations of the way the vote was manipulated and people got shafted out of their vote in California, which, I mean, I see it in Alabama. I didn't expect it to be in California when I moved back here. But here it is. It was like Selma. It really was. And but what people are mistaking what I'm trying to say. It doesn't mean don't vote, because they're going to try to take your vote away or make it difficult to vote, or you write on a provisional ballot and there's a very good chance they're going to throw it away. You mail in your ballot, that's dangerous. It doesn't say don't do it, don't vote. Yeah. Protect your vote. Take action. The last thing I want you to do, in fact, you got to vote because they don't want you to.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that reason. And that's a good transition to what my last question is for each of you, which is what we talked about at the top of the show. So what's next? Like, what should people be doing? We're hearing all of this. We know that they don't want us to vote. We know that there's a lot going on that is negative and that is scary when we're talking about violence and hatred and oppression. And yet here we all are. And we're not giving up, and we're determined to move forward. So what should people be doing? I want each of you to go around and give me one call to action for our audience, for our viewers, for all of us to know tomorrow when we wake up in the morning, what is something that we can do that will help us move forward?
I mean, it's just so much to say. I've been working in Flint and just looking at the realities of what had been going on there with emergency managers, and it's atrocious. But people became activists because of it. And they were being told by the media, by the government, that there was no problem, and they could feel it physically. They saw it in their children. They were like, no. That's, as you're talking about, all of the different communities and how we need to be really specific in dealing with everyone respectfully and responsibly. And when we went on a Bernie bus tour and we got to sit with natives who were like, talk about us as survivors of genocide and holders of our tradition. Don't, talking to a person who's, I'm not an immigrant, I'm a refugee. I'm not descended from slavery, I'm descended from greatness. And like really listening to each other and asking those questions and working through it, because it's really necessary, because these problems are really critical and they want to keep us divided. Because if we're over here Latino and African American, like it's easy to kind of keep us from realizing we're the majority. Yes. That we're profoundly powerful. And if we work together, and it doesn't mean, you know, like I put something out recently and it was like, I said something about a melting pot. And someone corrected me, it was like, it's not a melting pot, it's a salad. And I really love that because that's the reality about having this, how leaderful this moment is and making sure people really step into their power and identify themselves to represent their community, to represent their issues. But we can't let that divide us and undermine each other, which is what we've been doing. Because the governments and the corporations and the special interests and the oil and gas, they're all working with each other and scratching each other's backs, and they've got 4 and 8 and 10 and 12, 20-year long game plans, and we're just surviving. And that's what's really keeping us down. And so it's really about asking those questions and taking it offline and getting it physical and out there in the streets, whether that's civil disobedience, whether it's marching to the polls and voting, whether it's asking questions and organizing with people and sitting down and watching my peoples in a group, not by yourself and not just on your phone, but like inviting people to sit down with you and watch it together and then carry on the discussion afterwards and then give us feedback about what else we can do. Because this is why it's called My Peoples, because you at home are our peoples. Yeah. And so like this is a major part of it, and understanding that's the salad. That's what puts us all together, and it represents every one of our values. But it's not a melting pot. It doesn't blur those lines and just take us away from each other. So when, as we said before, like civil rights movement and the women's suffragette movement, all this, there were these big banner things, but now we're getting into the details of like how natives on the reservation need to be talked about with their HIV/AIDS issues. And trans community who have HIV/AIDS issues, like my friend Chloe Zabailo, who unfortunately isn't with us anymore, amazing trans women activist in New York City who worked so hard, as you were saying, offline, not like that big personality, but helped so much with housing and so many different things, and bringing attention to the fact that the medicine she was taking for her AIDS was breaking down her body, and it was never meant to take that long, and how we had to look at the pharmaceutical companies and how she was treated when she went to the hospital to get help, and instead she was ostracized and abused. And like just how all the intersectionality of all of these different systems, how we can respectfully communicate with each other and make that salad that is so robust and so healthy and so powerful that when we feed on that salad, and all of us, and take and have every bite be like, oh, that's something from that community, that community, that community, and I'm nourished, then there's nothing that can stop us. Yeah. Nothing.
I want to echo that, and I've also already quoted you several times saying, you know, if our vote wasn't important, they wouldn't be trying to suppress it. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's how powerful our vote is they are working their asses off to suppress these votes. And it's more apparent than ever that we are all, as you're saying, experiencing the same type of inequality, the same type of suppression. So we do need to ally with each other. I mean, one thing encouraging about the Asian American Pacific Islander community, when we were doing our college tour, they were the overwhelming majority coming out to register to vote. At every state college that we went to, the overwhelming majority. And when I went to Berkeley's law school graduation, majority. I was like, where are these people coming from? Like, I mean, it was amazing, and that's why they are
targets now.
Targets.
Yep.
And we are all experiencing that. And we need to ally, we need to partner with each other. We need to, like I was saying earlier, not wait until we have all the information. We need to reach outside of our communities and partner with each other and say, hey, let's work together to create this environment of equality for all. And what's most important, I think, in this election, as a call to action, something that you can do, you know, tomorrow, Monday. There is a bill that Tulsi Gabbard has proposed, HR 4108. 4108. HR 4108. One more time. HR 4108.
Okay.
Which is, she's proposed to get U.S. involvement in regime change to stop. And right now, again, reference to Rosario, the one thing our president can do without the support of Congress, the one thing, you know, it's not supposed to be this way, but they can send us to war. And we do have a candidate on the table that maybe two, but one for sure that is proposing Hillary is proposing a no-flight zone over Syria, and that would inevitably put us on another war front. And black and brown, minority people are the first to sign up for war and the first to be killed, and I am scared. I am fearful of that. And no matter what happens with who's elected, one thing we can do is stand up right now and support that bill. Call your local government, call your Congress people. It's very easy. Google is very helpful. Just look up your local congressperson, call them, and express your support of this bill. HR 4108.
Awesome.
For me, I have two calls of action. The first one is go out into your community, find a Muslim person, be their friend, be their ally. It is a very scary time to be Muslim in this country because of all the rhetoric that Donald Trump is putting out there. There's been a lot of, I'm so plugged into the Muslim millennial social media, and you hear these attacks happening constantly. If you see something happening, go stand by a hijabi woman and let her know that she's safe. Go stand next to people, make sure that they feel safe. This is one of the #1 issues that's happening right now, mainly because of everything that Donald Trump is saying. That's my first thing. My second thing is, if you do take an action, if you're in a campaign, understand that race isn't black and white, that there are Asian Americans, there are Pacific Islanders, there are multiple languages. So if you're going to do something, make sure that you provide your action in multiple languages. Make sure that you're reaching out in a culturally competent way and reaching out in multiple languages. And that's so important when reaching out to the Asian American Pacific Islander community.
Great, thank you.
So I and a couple of other activists, Latinx activists, are going to Orlando this week to connect with the local community. So I will definitely be tweeting out list of names of individuals, of organizations. Already various groups like Southerners on New Ground, Song, Mi Gente, Guerico, Familia, Trans Queer Liberation Movement are all in conversations with each other to really think about what does support look like at this moment for our folks, for our people who are incredible and in deep pain. And that we know at this moment our leadership is needed, and that, ese apoyo y ese amor is needed in this moment. So yeah, just my Twitter is at MUXERISA. Follow me, and I will definitely tweet those list of resources and folks who you can help support and elevate their message and their, how the support, what does support actually really look like for the community right now.
Okay, oh, there it is. All I have to do to fight the power is a comic book. I brought it because I know Rosario loves comic books, so. But I actually wrote a comic book. I do investigative reporting, but this is some of my best. And it's called Steal Back Your Vote, and the price is right, it's free. And I want people to do two things. I want you to go to gregpalast.com, download it for free, print it out. The Congressional Black Caucus has done this. The Pueblo communities of New Mexico have done this. This is how to make sure you protect your vote. Think of it as a ballot condom, okay? Vote protection, ballot protection, okay? And so gregpalast.com, download, steal back your vote, or you can go and get there's a few print copies left. We'll do some more. And what I'd like to do is arrange to have more, we have some translations. I want to get more translations going because this is vital. They don't want you to vote. They're going to try to steal it. So what? You know, when King walked across that bridge, I was just in Selma at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, not because I was commemorating 50 years of wonderful American civil rights progress, but because the black state senator from Selma called me and he said, Greg, can you come down? I'm the state senator, but I've been removed from the voter rolls. We're walking back 50 years backwards over the bridge. You know, the Voting Rights Act was ripped apart by the Supreme Court 2 years ago. We got a lot of work to do, okay? And so, you know, maybe when King walked across that bridge, those people couldn't vote, okay? And they faced 4 people were murdered on that march. You know, it wasn't easy. I talked to a 14-year-old kid who was locked in a metal box until she passed out by the police, okay? All right? this stuff, it just didn't start yesterday, okay? The killings didn't start yesterday. It's not this week's news. It's this century's news. It's this nation's news, unfortunately. But there's also that march over the bridge. We can do that again. So we have to protect ourselves. We have to take action. Okay, so you can't win with 51% of the vote. Stop crying. Okay? So we'll have to march out there and win with 61%. They can't steal every vote, every time. It doesn't happen that way. So go to Great Palast, get yourself unstupid, get a comic book. You know, until Patriot Act 3 kicks into effect, you can read things, you know. So, okay, so here it is. Here's the info. Love you. Thank you so much. To be here is just wonderful. Thank you for being here.
We got submitted one more call to action too. Go to progressivelove.com and sign a form to volunteer for a 10-day march from DC to the DNC. Okay? We're going to be talking about the DNC as we close out tonight. But for us to close out this segment, and before we are graced by a wonderful musician, I want us all to take one last kind of call to action here together in the room. If you could hold each other's hands, if you're comfortable doing that. And this is an amazing mantra by Assata Shakur that I know a lot of organizers use and love, and I'd love us to do that together tonight. So repeat after me, and we're going to get real hype, y'all, because this is it, okay? It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love each other and support each other.
We must love each other and support each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love each other and support each other.
We must love each other and support each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
All right, y'all. Please welcome to the stage Francisca Valenzuela.
Follow that. That's just like, ah! So I'm just so excited to be here. I'm so honored. I've been a My People's watcher and assistant to the audience before, so this is an honor to be here on stage. I was not aware of the bill. I'm so excited. I'm from Chile, so I support that bill because Chile was tremendously affected by the CIA. I got sent the email to participate and asked me about what kind of future I see. So I know I won't be as eloquent or as tremendous as these wonderful guests, but I do have a few words before I sing some words. So basically, everywhere in the world, we want to build a future where bodies are not subject to violence or hostility, where a healthy, fair life is a right but not a privilege, where we empower the individuals as well as empower the community, where we foster activism through vocation and our talents, where we foster empathy and curiosity, where we question and are invited to question our privilege or our privileged lives. A future where we are activated and enraged and we don't linger and indulge the confusion and the dissonance. Because we live in the United States and I've moved here from Chile. We moved here from Chile and there's so much fucking dissonance. How can a country be so wonderful and so awful at the same time? So my song is called Cathedral. It is about honoring the body as a cathedral. It is about honoring, now that I think about it, a safe space. So thank you, my peoples, for being a cathedral and a safe space for all of us. I want to really, really clarify, not the religious, shameful shadow of Catholicism we grew up in South America. Cathedral, the modern cathedral we build and shape ourselves. So here it goes. No good or evil, no wrong or right. All we have is right here. We've got a long way to go. So don't believe it. There are no miracles. to give. Oh, I am not guilty for what's natural. In my cathedral, in my cathedral, glorious body in all its perfection. I feel my blood flow, my body's electric. Oh, ooh, oh, oh, oh. So much confusion. I'm forever guilty. I don't know why it builds, but will it ever leave? Oh, oh, I am not sorry for what's natural. In my cathedral, sacred body, perfect machine. In my cathedral, I adapt and learn how to be. Glorious body in all its perfection. I feel my blood flow through my body's electric. Oh, glorious body with all its perfection. I feel my blood flow through my body's electric, 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 electric. Oh, electric. Oh, electric. Oh, electric, 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 electric. Sacred body, perfect machine. Woo! That's all. I adapt and learn how to be. Sacred body, perfect machine. I adapt and learn how to be. I learn how to be. I learn how to be. I sacred body, perfect machine. Will I adapt and learn how to be? Sacred body, perfect machine, you and me, you and me. I adapt and learn how to be, you and me. Will I adapt and learn? Will we adapt and learn?
Thank you guys. Thank you. You all, thank you so much, Francisca, Daniel. Thank you to all of our guests. This is our season finale, but we will be back. And even while we're gone, we're going to be active. So please stay glued to our Facebook page. We're going to the DNC, y'all. We'll update you on what's happening there. We hope to see you there. Stay tuned. We'll keep you updated on all of the calls to action that all of our guests shared tonight and many, many more. It's been such a pleasure to ride with you these past 6 weeks. My peoples, we are out. My people.